Hey, Editor Lucas here with a special video for today. Recently, the ladies began a new podcast series called the Kpop Scandal Iceberg, where they go through and detail K-pop's most widely known dramas to the secret underbelly of the most obscure entertainment companies. Well, since those episodes can get pretty long, I thought it'd be a waste not to share some of those fun stories with you guys. In this video, we will be covering two topics in the first most popular tier, racism and drug scandals. If you would like to learn more about the other topics in this tier, like idols dating, the aftermath of Produce X101, bullying, and many more, I encourage you to check out the link in the description to our podcast, which is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. A couple small disclaimers before we start the video. Number one, we are only covering scandals that occurred up until 2021, so if there have been any updates or new examples of the scandal since December 2021, the time of recording this, they will not be included. Number two, this isn't an extensive list. These are just the most well-known examples of these topics, and it would unfortunately be impossible to talk about every single time these things happen. Number three, some basic understanding of the K-pop community and culture is needed in order to understand everything we talk about today. Due to the amount of research needed to make these episodes, we thought it wise to skip the basics and go straight into the juicy details. Number four, none of the people making this episode are Korean or even have been to Korea, so we are talking about this strictly from an international fan's perspective. And disclaimer 4.5, specifically talking about racism. None of us are black or can speak personally to any of the issues we refer to in this episode. And lastly, number 5, obviously from the title you are aware of this, but to reiterate, I just want to explicitly put a trigger warning for talking about both racism and drugs. Your mental health is way more important than watching a YouTube video where random people on the internet talk about K-pop. With that being said, sit back, grab some popcorn, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
On that note, let's begin with the very easy topic of racism in the K-pop industry. So K-pop has a very long history of racism.
It is kind of an aspect of K-pop that has always been there and doesn't seem to be going away.
Going anywhere?
It has evolved, I think, since like when K-pop has started, but it's just kind of there in different. It's gotten better, but it's just there in different forms.
And to be honest, I'm not surprised that it exists. The overwhelming majority of the population, almost close to 100%, is ethnically Korean or Japanese.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, this is kind of not really surprising, unfortunately.
The issue at times with K-pop, especially when it becomes a global market, which it is trying to be, you can't have it both ways. You cannot have a music market that caters greatly and takes heavy influence from other cultures, especially, I'm gonna say it, black culture, but also have artists that blatantly don't know the basis of where any of this comes from and blatantly disrespect it. Mamamoo did an Uptown Funk cover wearing blackface. Now, blackface has been a contentious topic for years now.
That's also still a big problem in conversation in like Korean variety shows as well.
And oftentimes it's not the idols doing it, it is comedians doing it.
Yeah, that's where it's mostly happened.
They don't get as much international attention because they are not international figures. When idols do it, obviously it is more of a problem.
It's not, and I think this is like where it's like a lot of the stuff and a lot of the racism stuff can happen because of ignorance. I think that for Mamamoo, I don't think they had any bad intentions with it, but I do think it was like they just really had no idea how that would be viewed in like an international audience.
I think the thought process was they probably wanted to quote-unquote look the part, aka look similar to Bruno Mars.
I'm pretty sure that's what they said in their apology too, that they just wanted to look more like that and they didn't realize the repercussions and sort of how problematic it could have been.
Bam Bam, from GOT7, they were on tour in America and they were at Mark's family's home. And they were hanging out in Mark's pool with his family and his American friends.
Mark's friends straight up tricked Bam Bam into saying it too, like knowing it was bad. And probably them knowing that Bam Bam didn't know that it was bad, they like tricked him into saying it.
But also possibly him knowing that it was bad, but doing it in a crowd of people he thought he was comfortable with.
Because after this point, Bam Bam has also admitted to saying it multiple times in the past as well.
Now, there is also a thing we have here for cultural appropriation, especially with a lot of K-pop hairstyles are deemed not great. I'm looking at the dreads and the braids at times.
That's a whole debate where some people go in between of like whether it is or whether people are cop blocking. It's a mess. It's a mess.
Point to make, none of us are black.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I speak to cultural appropriation in that way? Also, no.
It definitely exists, and it's definitely still an ongoing conversation among like a lot of the international K-pop community on whether or not it's okay or not. And I don't think that there is just a blatantly correct answer for it. Instead of it being a Western problem, this is very much a more Korean specific problem, is colorism. And that's because there is essentially a light-skinned beauty standard in South Korea and in a lot of other Asian countries. And so essentially a lot of idols who have darker skin get made fun of
bullied.
on variety shows for it.
By their members.
By their own members.
Other members.
This is by like people who they are friends with.
This especially used to be a much bigger problem in second gen K-pop. We have two of the main examples here, but this happened to most of the if you can think of a group that had one darker skinned one darker quote unquote darker skinned member, or someone who was slightly more tan than the other ones, then they were probably had received those comments either from presenters, interviewers, and probably from their own members. The two main examples we have here are N from VIX and Kai from EXO, who are, I think, the two most famous people who are ridiculed mercilessly.
The VIX with N is just horrible. Like I watched a lot of VIX variety stuff, and it is just like a constant there with all of them.
It's like a really bad joke that you keep repeating constantly when it's just like, it's not funny.
But that everyone keeps laughing at, so you wonder oftentimes, because we all three of us sort of got into K-pop really, and it was third gen, but I really liked a lot of second gen groups, so I would go and watch a lot of their stuff, and it was just that kind of comedy that I was just very uncomfortable with. Even when I was watching it, that I'm like, is this a joke that's funny to a Korean audience? And it does seem like it was, because it kept happening.
It's like a weird form of like physical comedy almost, by mockery.
In a way, but it's more like they just keep describing, there was this one specific instance where they were talking about a music video and VIX, and they were talking about having to always change the lighting when N was there.
그 뮤직비디오 촬영하면서 혹시 힘들었거나 아니면 재미있었던 에피소드 같은 게 있어요?
너무 까매서 그런 적이 있었나? 그러니까 너무 까매서라기보다는
다시 간 네.
그렇죠. 그러니까 제가 반사판이 좀 많이 필요한, 이제 반사판들이 정신을 못 차리고 이렇게 왔다 갔다 하다가
뭐라 써 있는데?
아니요, 까만은 지워주세요.
까만 꾸리피.
MPD님이 까만 거고 저는
까만
구릿빛.
그냥 꾸리피.
네, 그립지.
네, 구릿빛. 구리빛. 네, 구릿빛. 네, 그렇습니다.
I have a very vivid memory of an episode of Weekly Idol where they were doing like a weird like Pictionary game, and one of the things that Leo had to draw was N, and so he literally just drew a black circle on a stick, and they apparently got that was N like immediately, because that is just the joke that is there always. And the things with Kai too is that Kai, like, obviously EXO is like a second gen group. The stuff with Kai happened in Super M too. Like, we're still making fun of him for that in recent days.
I do think that it is very good that we are sort of moving away from that. I do think that we have made great improvements in this type of scandal, where I don't think we are seeing as much of these racism scandals or colorism or any of this happening as often. I do think they are just changing. I do think that it is just evolving. It'll never go away. I hope it does, but I don't feel like it will.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna go away entirely ever, but I do think it's definitely has been better in recent years for sure. To move on from the very fun topic of racism into the even more fun topic of drugs.
Great.
There's a lot of drug scandals that happen from a Western point of view. They're not.
Most of these
they
don't
do not matter at all.
Most of these
do not matter.
They're a big issue in Korea, and all of these things are still illegal in Korea. Probably a little bit lesser known, but in 2001, Psy got arrested for weed use. It got no traction because Psy was not that popular back in 2001. Also, K-pop was not big in the international audience in 2001.
You'll find that that Psy is the reason K-pop now is a contributing factor why K-pop is currently now popular. So
yes.
I think that one was kind of swept under the rug. So then we have G-Dragon from the lovely group Big Bang. In 2011, let's go with quote-unquote accidentally took a quote-unquote cigarette from someone he didn't know in Japan, and then they would later find out that it wasn't a cigarette, it was actually weed. So when he was coming back to Korea, when they drug tested him, that's when they found out, yes, this was weed. It is interesting because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but it's not even that you can leave Korea, do drugs legally outside of Korea, and then come back. When you come back into Korea, you are drug tested. So you cannot just go out and do drugs. I don't know how he got it.
I don't know how he got away with it either.
Scot-free.
But he
this
did.
was 2011. Big Bang is massively popular at this point.
Yeah, this is
But,
right before Fantastic Baby, too. Like a year before.
Yeah, this
that.
is like right before Fantastic Baby. Like this is right before he's about to like blow up internationally. It's insane to me that like YG managed to get him nothing. Not even probation, just nothing happened because of this. YG, I think, had more power back then.
I think that had a lot of power back then, yeah.
And a lot of money and good connections, apparently. I think that's
because
what
you'll
got
find
this
as we
out.
go down that as, you know, the companies change a little bit, they're more willing, I guess, to let their artists out to dry. Because then we go to the 2014 Park Bomb scandal. She was accused of smuggling a narcotic amphetamine, which is Adderall. She was prescribed it by a doctor in the US legally, and then was trying to take it back with her to Korea, but Adderall is not a legal drug in Korea. So she was then detained for that. Nothing happened with her legally because I guess it was more of a I think they figured out it was more of a misunderstanding situation as opposed to her trying to sell drugs.
But her reputation got trashed in Korea, though.
And I think that's what really happened is her public like reputation is like destroyed after that.
Legally, she was fine, but she also never came back to 21 post 2014. She was in that one like CL Mama performance when they got back together for that one performance. She showed up and it was great, and we had that last performance, and then she was in the goodbye video, and then 21 died. I just think that her public reputation did not need to be as trash as it was.
No, and I think it's like the international audience at that point, especially probably like the more Western audience, like, because I think they were also calling it a narcotic amphetamine to make it sound worse than it is, but once you look into it and it's literally Adderall, at that point I think a lot of people understand it a lot better.
To play devil's advocate, you do have to, in the media, they could just say Adderall. In any court proceeding, you do kind of have to give it what it is legally defined as.
Yeah.
So I'll give it that. I just think that it was overblown. But I also think that this is like early K-pop getting popular in the West. I think people were just very like reactionary. I find that a lot of K-pop fans are very reactionary. So anything to make an idol look good or bad, you're gonna take that opportunity. So next we have T.O.P. In 2017, he tested positive for weed, and during this time, he was also doing his military service, and he received a 10-month suspended sentence. I remember when this happened. This was sort of the first scandal that I was sort of very much aware of as it occurred, of these drug scandals. This is also one of the first times we see that them actually cracking down harder on idols, because as you see, the further we go down,
the worse the sentences
get.
Oh, yeah. So the next one, we have B.I., formerly of Icon. In 2019, he was essentially kicked out of Icon for purchase of weed and LSD. He's got a 4-year probation with a 3-year jail sentence if he breaks probation.
80 hours of community service, 40 hours of drug treatment sessions, and to pay 1.5 million won.
So I'm pretty sure, don't quote me 100% on this, but I'm pretty sure I read in an article that he said he was using it because it helped his creative process for writing music.
Hey there, if you got this far in the video, I just wanted to say thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did like it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and comment to let me know if you want to see more videos like this. Hope to see you around again, and see ya. Bye-bye.